Cyber Reapers. Hello, Cyber Reapers. So tonight or today, whenever, wherever you are, I would like to talk about a book. So this one's a little bit of a spooky book, but I absolutely loved it. I read it in two sessions, because I really knew this book was filling the void of what I wanted to read next. It absolutely was just so good and so fulfilling. I loved it. So, what is this book? So this book is called The Forest Demands Its Due, and it's by Kosoko Jackson. So, also as a heads up, if you have read Don't Let the Forest In by C.G. Drews, I have talked about that book before. If you have read that and enjoyed it, I believe you will also really enjoy this book. So, why do I say that? Because this book is a fantasy, dark academia, horror book. It's young adult. It's got a queer romance as like the main romance, the main character is queer. So it's got a lot of heart. It's just so great. And I didn't know I needed it until I read the blurb and I went, I need to read this. So yeah, that's how that started, my reading journey with this book. And then, as I'm getting into it, I discover the premise. So let me tell it to you, yeah? The more specifics of this story. Douglas is our main character. He is a black gay kid who is a minority at this prestigious school called Regent Academy. Now, Regent Academy caters very much to white, straight, rich kids. So, Douglas feels quite like an outlier there. But whenever he got an offer to this school, he just couldn't feel like he could say no for the sake of himself and for his mother, who moved there with him and got a job there. And this was after a pretty dark point in their life. I won't get too much into that because I think that is a little spoiler territory, but for the sake of describing a little bit of that, Douglas was accused of a crime, a pretty serious crime, and he went to jail for it for a little while. And that has seriously shifted a lot of his, I guess, mindset on the world around him. And yeah, it doesn't help to be reminded of the oppressive systems around him when he goes to school at Regent Academy, and pretty much everybody else there is more privileged than him. But he's still headstrong. He's still very much himself, and he is proud to be himself. And I just think he's a really cool character to follow, especially as we get into more of Regent Academy's secrets, because that has to do with the forest surrounding Regent Academy and the town that it's next to. Because there's this dark forest, it's deadly even, and students are not allowed in there. And something that Douglas kinda discovers on accident is that whenever a student dies, on campus or in this forest, day, nobody remembers this student. So Douglas thinks that's a little weird, considering he remembers this student. And he finds that a few others do as well, but very, very few. And when he goes to the principal of the academy, things start spiraling. He gets involved with learning more about the curse that is set upon this town, this area. Yeah. Also, my cat has joined us, so if you hear some light purring in the background, don't worry about it, that's just him. So, on to what is this curse? Essentially, nobody who was born in the area or married into the families who were part of this area 300 years ago, nobody can leave. Like, none of them can leave. The students who come, like, to the academy, they can come and go. But if you were born in this area, you cannot leave. And that feels very inhibiting for the people who, were born there. And anybody who dies there, now it doesn't matter if you were born there, if you die there, you will be forgotten by everybody except for those who were born there. So, weaving in and out of different things, there's different sort of magic elements going on here. Not only that, but Douglas can hear warnings from the forest. He kind of has this connection with it, this magical connection. And even though he wasn't born there, he has that. And so, those who were born there, including the headmaster, suddenly go, oh, you have a special connection to the forest. Maybe you can figure out how to break this curse. And so, that's where everything starts going and going and going. The whole plot then just goes pretty quickly from there of Douglas is trying to figure out how to break this curse, because even though really it's kind of got nothing to do with him, he could just leave if he wanted to, he decides, for the sake of the people who have lived there for the 300 years or so that the curse has been around, he decides for them that if he can, he's gonna break the curse. And it's no easy feat, because there are a ton of forest monsters, and these monsters are like humanoid but mixed with like trees, flora, fauna. They're grotesque, they're interesting, and I love their descriptions. And just, they seem very creative, and there's a certain amount of cruelty that goes into how they're created, and you can read that for yourself of like what that is. But I really loved just all of the vibes that had to do with the forest and the creatures, the magic, and even like the historical figures. Not figures as in we know them, I mean the figures in the story who play a part in the history of the town. Reading about them and their influence on the modern day was really, really interesting. It felt like it came together really nicely. And I think it's similar to, if you've seen the Fear Street movies, that's a horror magic, where in the third movie, they kind of explain what happened that started all of the resurrecting of monsters and stuff in the town. It kind of gives me that vibe. In this one book, it kind of has those elements in it of reaching back into the past and showing that things weren't necessarily as they seem in the future, and just figuring out more about that and empathizing with kind of everyone to a certain extent, but ultimately, like, Douglas is the moral compass for the story. And I really liked following his perspective, because even though he had his insecurities and he wasn't like the strongest of all of them, he still wanted to do what was right in his mind. And he just, like, he'll make mistakes sometimes, but he certainly does try his best to actually help people and to see the to try to see the humanity, or to empathize with the people around him, and to also not necessarily trust everybody around him. That was something that throughout the book I really enjoyed as well, as I was trying to figure out who to trust and who might be not telling the full truth. And especially when everybody was kind of speaking in half-truths and not trying to tell Douglas everything, it resulted in there being some really interesting tension. Even between Douglas and his love interest. Because yes, I mentioned there is a queer romance. And I absolutely loved it. It was a really cool ride or die kind of romance where all of the horror around them really resulted in them bonding quite a bit. And it was so tense, but it was so great. Yeah. And I can't talk about that too much, but there are parallels between, like, the historical and the present. Those parallels that are just so neat. And it has to do, I would say it has to do a little bit with the romance of the present, connecting to something in the past, that I thought was really neat. What else to say on that? I've already mentioned representation notes also, because really the cast of characters is not diverse as a whole, as much as really it's like Douglas and his outsideness to everybody else. Although there are some characters who are not white, they come in as well. But overall, the overarching, like, systems in place in this story make it to where predominantly Douglas is interacting with straight white characters, with the exception of, like, his love interest not being straight. Douglas really is the minority figure in all of this, and he has to kind of come to terms with healing himself and also helping others heal, despite the oppressive systems, rather than for the oppressive systems. And I think the exact wording there makes more sense after you read the book. Yeah, I'm not sure how much more of it I can say without diving too deep into the plot of, like, near the ending. Yeah. Hopefully, though, that's a encouraging point and not a not something that just feels like yeah, whatever, okay, I can't do anything with that information. But what else? Oh, so the ending, don't worry, I won't actually, like, talk about what happens. I will say, though, the ending was satisfying, and I really liked Douglas's character development. I found that very strong, and where he ended up by the end of the book, or how he ended up by the end of the book, really made sense to me, even though I didn't see it coming. Like, there were aspects of it that were that were kind of, not exactly plot twist, but like, that were unexpected, I can at least say that. And I found that super cool. Is there anything else I can say? Because I did breeze through my notes pretty quickly there, actually. I just found this book super fun to read. I don't remember if I mentioned that already, that I read it in 2 sessions, but yeah, I read it the day before yesterday and then yesterday, and the only reason I stopped the day before yesterday was because I was falling asleep, because it was getting too late in the night for me to be able to keep my eyes open. And then the second night I had forgotten to take my melatonin, and so that's probably why I could keep my eyes open for long enough to finish the entire book. But it was just so immersive, it was so fulfilling. I felt like, even though I was going to try to only read a certain amount and then say, okay, I'll go to bed then, I really wanted to finish the rest of it. It just really, it felt oddly welcoming of a story. Like, I felt very much like it was warm in a weird way. It was warm, comfortable, but also, spooky, deadly, scary, at the same time. And I wasn't sure how things were gonna end up. So, just all of that wrapped together made for a really immersive, enjoyable experience, that I highly recommend. And I am now maybe gonna need to, start reading more forest-related horror books, especially if they're dark academia, have some magic sprinkled in them, and then have, a marginalized main character who is, the key to solving everything having to do with, the dark forest horror stuff. I'm not sure I knew I needed that, but this book is, awakening that in me. Because, initially I read Don't Let the Forest In by C.G. Drews, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. I didn't realize after that, though, that I'd been longing to, delve more into that very, very specific kind of niche, premise style, maybe. And then with reading this book, it really went into how to heal, despite oppressive systems. I know I already said that exact phrase, but I think that is probably the best way for me to describe it without going too deep into what that means. So it's, yeah, I think somewhere in, Libby, I think, when I was scrolling through the blurb, it was compared to, the movie Get Out, which that had me curious. I was going, oh no, what aspects of Get Out are you talking about? And I'm not going to spoil all the aspects, but I can at least say, for the stuff that I've already talked about, definitely the horror with a black main character surrounded by a predominantly white environment, where things are just off and it seems like people are trying to use him. That's very similar in the way that this book kind of relates to that, and there are more pieces there that I can't get into without getting into spoilers, but there are some similarities to Get Out, in case that's a draw for you. And I already mentioned, Don't Let the Forest In is a similar sort of premise, and a similar sort of tone and feel, and also the Fear Street trilogy kind of has a similar feel with like connecting the present horrors to the historical horrors of this cursed town kind of vibes. Yeah, this book really like combined a lot of like different pieces of things that I really enjoy reading or seeing in media. Yeah, I'm gonna be riding the high of like how I've enjoyed this book so much for a little while now. Yeah. Yeah. It was so good. So, yeah, it'd be nice if I could go back and reread it without knowing anything about what was gonna happen next. I guess now, though, I can reread it at some point, knowing what happens and seeing all the little pieces that were dropped of hints of what's to come. So there's that. Yeah, I think I'm definitely liking that I'm actually getting a little bit more into horror, and pleasantly surprised considering I mostly stayed away from like consuming horror movies and books for several years. But now I'm kind of just slowly but surely like immersing myself in more and more of them and finding, oh wow, I actually really like this genre quite a bit. So I don't know, I might have to read more. I might have to also see what other books Kosoko Jackson writes, because apparently this isn't like the only one they've written. Sorry, he's written. I remember he, him pronouns. So I'll have to look into his other works as well. Yeah. I don't know. So I hope that this doesn't cause you to have like bad spooky dreams, but maybe like good spooky dreams. I don't know if you've had a good spooky dream before. But actually, after reading part of the first part of this book, I did have kind of a good spooky dream where things were like kind of dark and ominous, but it wasn't like scary. Yeah. It's kind of like if you've ever had like a dream that's kind of Halloween-y. It has that kind of tone and vibe. I don't know if you have, but I hope that you do experience it if you want to. And yeah. So that's all that I have to say, I think, right now. And I appreciate you listening. Thank you for listening, because you are an awesome listener. And I hope that wherever you go next, whatever you do next, that it is fun and or relaxing and or worthwhile to you. And ideally all three.